Greetings, Inland Empire. This is the latest edition of the Political Empire, your latest news on all of the political happenings here in our inland region. I'm Kim Pierceall with the Press Enterprise, and we'll get right to it. We have a jam-packed show full of topics. First off, the Assembly has apparently, some members have been voting on bills after the bill has been passed and or failed. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Also, key endorsements have been made in a few races, in particular one between Dutton and Gary Miller, so Bob Dutton and Gary Miller. And secondly, finally after that, we're going to be talking about tribal politics, in particular the recent passing of Richard Milanovich, the leader of the Agua Caliente tribe. And finally, Ken Calvert paid a visit to our office, and we'll be talking to him, to one of our reporters who talked to him about what he said. So first off, right off the bat, we have got two very important people who are going to be talking to us live today. Jim Miller in Sacramento. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Kim.
And Ben Goad in Washington. How you doing, Ben?
Doing great, Kim. Thanks.
Fantastic. We're going to start off with Jim. Jim, tell me a little bit about how the Assembly manages to vote for bills after they've already passed. So it sounds like some Assembly members have been voting after a bill has already come to its conclusion. So what's going on there?
Right. The Associated Press had a story that moved yesterday about the practice in the Assembly where members can add on or come off after the roll on a vote has closed. So a bill is either passed or failed. And then before the Assembly adjourns for the day, people, members of the Assembly can go up to the clerk's desk and change their vote. And
the reason why we were
goes on.
The reason why we were particularly interested is because Jeff Miller, a Republican from Corona, and Kevin Jeffries, the Republican from Lake Elsinore, they were both first and third, essentially, in doing this the most since January. So when the Associated Press looked at about 400 instances in which this occurred, they were first and third for doing this. So about, 31 times is the amount of times that Miller did it, and 25 times is how many times Jeffries did it. Is there a reason why they would? Why don't they just abstain in that circumstance?
I think in the case of Jeff Miller, Assemblyman Miller, in today's story, he said most of those came on one day when he wasn't feeling well. In the case of Assemblyman Jeffries, he kind of has a policy of not voting on bills that he hasn't had time to read and understand fully. And on some of those, he abstains completely, but on others, he said he goes up and changes his vote at the end of session.
There were critics who said, though, including the executive director of the First Amendment Coalition, who said the practice wastes constituents' time because Assembly members might as well be absent. Is it a fair criticism that perhaps these votes are wasting time?
Well, I mean, it's clear there are clearly some vote changes or add-ons or take-off or people coming off. There are clearly some that happen for tactical reasons, either because of you want to stay on good terms with someone in the Assembly, or you're looking ahead to your election and you want to vote the same way as your potential opponent. That happens. There are other instances where people are just not on the floor, or they're sick, like in the case of Jeff Miller. I'm not sure I agree fully with that man's comment, but that's his opinion.
And as far as the 400 votes, too, because this is 400 votes since January, it seems like a lot. Is it a lot?
I mean, that's a big number. I think it's going to get a lot bigger as the session goes along. I mean, I think you were saying there were 75 bills that were considered on the Assembly floor between January and February. I mean, they could do that in one day toward the end of session, maybe twice that number in one day toward the end of session, and that's going to be closer to the election. And so that means there will probably be more people at the end of session going up and changing their vote or changing a non-vote to a yes or no vote.
Okay. Well, certainly it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rest of the session. And in other political news, of course, there's votes, but then there's also getting endorsements to get that office. And with us, we've got Ben Goad from Washington. And talk to us a little bit about the race between Gary Miller and Bob Dutton.
Yeah, well, Miller and Dutton are both running for the 31st Congressional District, which goes all the way from Rancho Cucamonga to Redlands. It includes a big chunk of the San Bernardino Valley, including Colton, Rialto, San Bernardino, and some cities around there. So Miller currently represents a district to the west, but he got stuck in a bad spot when the State Redistricting Commission drew its new lines last summer. So he decided to move to Rancho and run there after Jerry Lewis announced that he'd be retiring at the end of this year. Dutton, meanwhile, is turned out of the state Senate and is the other Republican trying to win the seat. There are some Democrats running, but Miller and Dutton are the two Republicans in the race, and they both have high profiles. So they were both competing for the state's backing, the state Republican Party backing. That endorsement was announced Sunday. And Gary Miller got it. I asked him about its significance, and I think we have a clip of his response.
We do. Let's go to that clip.
Oh, it's very important. I mean, my friend Bob Dutton and I are running against each other, and we both, went and gave speeches to the Central Committee in San Bernardino County trying to get their endorsement. I got more votes than he did there, but nobody had 2/3. We did the same thing with the state party. I thought he had an advantage because he was actually the Senate Minority Leader last year, and he was, one leading Republican in the state. He was a member of that committee. He would have, a year ago, he would have been a voting member, so those are all his peer group. And I thought that gave him an advantage going in the door, but as it came out, we received unanimous endorsement. I was very pleased.
And Gary Miller won the endorsement, but Dutton on the other side, of course, didn't win that endorsement. Jim, you spoke to Dutton about this. Curious, what is his take about the California Republican Party going with Miller instead?
Right. I mean, he was there. He was at the Burbank Hotel, as was Congressman Miller, when the party's board of directors made this endorsement. And when I talked to him on Monday, he said he was disappointed but not surprised. And then he proceeded to, take issue with what he called more or less the Washington inside crowd for ensuring that Congressman Miller got the endorsement.
And I think we have a clip of that interview as well. Let's go to that clip.
Well, like I said, it's always disappointing. It was not unexpected, though. Okay. They decided to give him some kind of they've anointed him as the incumbent for the district, even though he doesn't serve even 1 square foot of it, or even one person in the district. But that's just part of politics, but that's not what I'm about. I'm running. I didn't decide to run for Congress because I become part of the good old boy club. Okay, I'm running for Congress to represent my district, and so I'm not in it to try to make a career out of this. The Washington gang has never really come to California with the idea of trying to do anything but extract money from California. They've never really came here to play, to help at all. If anything, they've always just taken from California. They've never given back. And so I don't really care about the Republican National Congressional Committee. They're of no consequence to me one way or the other.
Interesting. And Ben, curious, because you mentioned that Miller is moving into the area, moving into Rancho Cucamonga, I believe. Is that going to be an issue, the fact that he's not necessarily from the area?
Yeah, well, I think clearly Dutton is saying there that Miller's coming from outside, and he's making that point in the clip. It's sure to be an issue both in the June primary and if Miller makes it to the general election in November there too. This year, California has a new top 2 primary system, so it's conceivable that they could both wind up in the general up against each other. The district does lean a little Democratic in terms of voter registration. There's 4 Democrats in the race, including Redlands Mayor Pete Aguilar, who's been very aggressive in raising money with support from some Democratic leaders in Congress. But I'm expecting both Dutton and Miller to run aggressive campaigns. Miller's current district only has a small piece of San Bernardino County, but he said when we spoke that he's done business over the years in just about all of the cities in the new district, and he's forged relationships with county and city leaders there. And I also asked Miller about Dutton's suggestion that the endorsement, the state endorsement, was a result of Washington establishment Republicans protecting one of its own.
And let's see what he had to say, because we have a clip of that statement as well.
Oh, that's far from the truth. I'm running my own campaign. I mean, I've received my endorsements from Washington. The Republican National Congressional Committees endorse me. I've received very significant major endorsements from Washington, but that has nothing to do with the local campaign that we're running. I'm out speaking with my opponent. We're arguing our case and why people should support us. I think we're winning at that level, and that's where it should be, at the local level. Washington doesn't get me local endorsements. I accomplish that on my own based on relationship I have with people and them knowing me. So to say that it's a Washington gang or however it's been put, it's rather a straw man, because that's not the issue at all.
Well, Ben and Jim, thank you so much for talking to me about the Miller-Dutton race. It should be interesting. And Jim is going to stay with us now, because we're going to talk about tribal politics. And again, thanks, Ben, for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Political Empire. Jim?
You bet, anytime.
Thanks so much, Ben. Jim, let's talk about Richard Milanovich. He was the longtime leader of the Agua Caliente tribe in Palm Springs, a very influential tribe when it came to politics and changing regulations and so forth. What were some of his greatest political accomplishments? He recently passed away. We're curious, how is this going to impact politics for their tribe, tribes overall?
Right. I mean, you're correct. I mean, he was definitely a giant in the Coachella Valley, and then in just statewide tribal issues as well. You asked what his political accomplishments. I mean, he played a signature role in the legalization of tribal gambling in California, with Prop 5 in 1998 and then with Prop 18 in 2000. And then in 2006, the Agua Caliente tribe was among 4 tribes in our region that negotiated with the Schwarzenegger administration on casino expansion deals. And those eventually were approved by voters in 2008. And, that was another major issue that he helped bring to fruition.
And will his absence affect politics for the tribes going forward as they move towards expansion once again, expanding their gaming properties and so forth?
I think there is bound to be some kind of impact. I talked to a few people on Sunday and on Monday, and asking them that question, and it's unclear. But Mr. Milanovich had such a high profile that it would seem like there would be some effect. I mean, one issue that's on the agenda right now is the idea of internet gambling, or poker, or some other types of games, and the legislature is considering that right now, and Mr. Milanovich won't be around for that.
True. Well, we'll certainly keep an eye out for what goes on with tribal politics going forward with the state and with the nation. And again, thank you, Jim, for being with us from Sacramento. We're going to take a break right now and come back with our reporter, Jeff Horseman, who's going to talk a little bit about Ken Calvert's visit to the Press Enterprise.
We are your breaking news leader. News happens. Stay up to date with expanded coverage in the Press Enterprise delivered to your home. Follow the story throughout the day on PE.com. Receive news updates in your inbox or on your mobile device. That is how we keep you connected to your community. The Press Enterprise and PE.com. For home delivery, call 1-800-794-NEWS.
Welcome back to Political Empire. We recently had a special visitor come to the office, Ken Calvert, U.S. Congressman Ken Calvert, and I personally have a special visitor in the studio today, Jeff Horseman, our Riverside County political reporter. He was in the meeting with Ken Calvert, and Jeff, tell me a little bit about why he stopped by.
Well, he was here because he wanted to talk to our editorial board. Local politicians do this from time to time to touch on a variety of topics, and one of the topics he talked about was the GOP presidential primary race, and he basically said, look, I kind of hope it's over as soon as possible. He's endorsed Romney. He thinks he's the strongest candidate, and he just wants to see it wrapped up by June, so whoever wins the nomination has the best chance of beating Obama.
Nice, and that was one topic amongst many, and there's quite a, controversial topic in the news lately, and that's about the contraception debate, whether or not it should be funded by the government, insurance companies should fund it, and where does he fall in this issue, and what does he think of Rush Limbaugh, and especially that lightning rod of controversy recently?
Well, he's kind of dismayed by the whole debate because he thinks it's been kind of turned to make it, are Republicans against contraception, which in his view is ridiculous. And so he wants to kind of see it, kind of reframed so that the Republicans maybe aren't so much on the defensive. Now, as for Rush Limbaugh and what he said about the Georgetown law student, he's not pleased. He said Rush kind of threw gas on the fire by, using those terms to describe that student. But he also said, hey, you look at Bill Maher, he said the worst things, and he seems to get a pass. So it's one of those things, I think he would just kind of prefer that the national focus move on to something else.
And curious, because he's been in office for quite some time, he's been in Washington, knows the Washington ways. Things have changed, though, and I'm curious, what did he have to say about what it's like to do business in Washington as a politician, as an elected official now?
Well, he talked a lot about how increasingly partisan it's become, how you really can't, reach out as much to other lawmakers. And one of the more telling quotes that I heard from him was talking about, hey, back in the day, you used to be able to have a candid conversation behind closed doors with someone, and now there's no way you can have a conversation without it appearing in print the next day. And so, like a lot of makers here, he's kind of bemoaning the lack of bipartisanship.
And curious, he noted who he thinks might be a good vice presidential candidate.
Yeah, he was asked that, and the first name that came out of his mouth was Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He thinks that he can really appeal to what's going to be a key state in this presidential race. He also mentioned Chris Christie, although he said, Christie's pretty much said he's not going to do it. He also mentioned Pawlenty, but he worried that Pawlenty might be too moderate, to attract conservative voters.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for stopping by the studio today and talking to us about Ken Calvert's visit. And thank you for watching another edition of The Political Empire. I'm your new host, Kim Pierceall, and you'll be seeing us still every week. So feel free to stop by pe.com for all the latest inland politics news.